during the session just for some interaction with yourselves. So a couple of basic questions and kind of prompting questions to you. So if you have a look at slido.com or on the website there that is up on the screen, you'll be able to interact with Slido. You can also, if you want to pose questions or leave comments, use the chat function, which you'll find on the bottom of your screen. You'll see the chat button there where you can send Darren and myself comments or questions. And we'll be happy to try and take those at the end of the presentation. So next slide, please, Darren. So Derek was just asking about the codes for Slido. You'll get the codes when those particular slides come up, Derek. So we'll just briefly introduce ourselves. So as I said, my name is Seamus Hoyne. I'm the Development and Public Engagement Manager in Limerick Institute of Technology, working with a team of 28 people, full-time and part-time within the development unit, working across a broad range of projects, all in the area of sustainability, sustainable energy, climate action, social enterprise, rural development. So very committed personally and professionally to the whole area. And I'll just let Darren introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Darren. I work with Seamus in the development units of Limerick Institute of Technology, and I'm a senior project officer working on climate action projects. So I work on projects with partners throughout Europe and Ireland. I'm looking at climate risk projects, climate leadership, and any type of project, EU funded project as well. And going forward, we'll be working with the local authorities here in Ireland within the next year and looking at climate leadership and climate change as well. So you have probably the best two people to speak to hopefully this evening regarding this. We have a lot of experience.
Great, so next.
Just admitting one or two more people there.
Okay, great.
Welcome everyone. So we actually have the first question for you on Slido. So you can access Slido through slido.com, or if you have a QR reading code on your phone as well, you can scan the barcode and it'll bring you straight to us. The code for Slido is #T157. So the first question we're going to ask you this evening is, who do you think is responsible for tackling climate change? Is it the national government, local government, everyone, large industry, energy suppliers, or other? So I'll give you all a couple of moments there and see how everyone gets on with that and see have we a good response rate. So far at the moment we have 4 responses with everyone going. National government as well as coming in. And again, the overwhelming majority so far seems to be between everyone and the national government. So let's give another couple of seconds there and see if we have any more responses. Excellent. So the majority of people have said that everyone is really responsible for climate change, which is great to hear because everyone can do their absolute part and become a leader within their business, their family, their community, their localities. And anywhere that you can make real changes is great. Obviously, we have national and local governments where we will go along with their policies, their recommendations as well. And they really set the targets for us all to follow. But really everyone can do their best for climate change and climate change leadership. So for the first part of the presentation, I'm just going to talk through about why we discuss climate change and some of the questions you will guess as possible climate change leaders or future climate change leaders. So what is climate change is one of the things we'll often guess. And speaking to younger people, speaking to schools, it's something everyone has heard of, but not necessarily will know everything about it. So put quite simply, climate change means a significant shift in the mean state, event, and frequency of the global climate. We know that the climate is changing. We've been hearing it from the 1980s when we talked about the ozone layer and whole CFCs, but there is absolutely a change that we can see. Over the last 800,000 years, there has been natural cycles within the Earth's climates. We've seen ice ages, we've seen warmer interglacial periods, and after the last ice age, we saw an increase in temperature over the space of about 10,000 years of about 3 degrees. But it is really within the last 200 years where we see the real change within climate change. And this corresponds to the rise in CO2 levels within the Earth's atmosphere. And the rises in temperature and CO2 levels are now well above the natural cycle that we've seen over 800,000 years. So while some climate deniers will say, well, it happens naturally, it does happen naturally, but we are speeding up the process. Furthermore, we'll often hear, well, we can't regulate the heat because of the sun. So we know that the sun is the primary source of changes and heat within the Earth system, and relatively small changes within the sun's output can cause changes within the Earth system. However, when we look at climate change and we see the real terms of climate change, it's really from the 1970s, 80s on that we're looking at. And actually satellite observations and the intake of sunspots and energy output in the sun has shown a slight decrease in the sun's overall output since the 1970s. So however, instead of cooling, if we're looking at it just from a sun point of view, we can still see that over that time, 50 years, the Earth has certainly warmed. Furthermore, the sun would, if we had increases and decreases within the sun's output, it would heat the whole Earth as a whole, including the last few kilometers of within Earth, so the troposphere of where we live, and the layer above the stratosphere. But observations have shown that the stratosphere is actually cooling, but the troposphere, where our greenhouse gases live, have absolutely increased. So when we talk and look at climate change and the plethora of evidence that exists, while we're talking to the climate deniers, really what we should be talking to is those with climate ambivalence. So people who believe that yes, climate change is real, but they can't do anything about it. And that's where we can make the real change in work. One of the big things that we've talked about in climate change is that it's a person-centric issue. And we can see that through the many climate graphs that we can see. We've seen numerous of them over the last 20, 30 years. This one, Show My Stripes, in particular, I think is really effective. And these are the temperature changes in Ireland since 1901. And you can see that we have cooler periods up to the warm periods, in particular from around the 1970s, 80s, and in particular the 1990s up. Earth's climate has absolutely, utterly warmed. Since records began, we've noted that the warmest 20 years on record have been recorded since the 1980s. And in particular, if we have a look at this graph here, 2016 globally was the warmest year on record. And we can see the increases in temperature along with the increases in carbon dioxide concentrations are continually growing. Again, we have so much evidence about this, not just from Ireland, but from around the world. So the Greenland and Arctic ice sheets have decreased in mass, while the extent and thickness of the Arctic ice sheet has declined rapidly over the last few decades. We see this mentioned on numerous interviews, documentaries and things like that. Glaciers are retreating worldwide at an extremely fast rate. And more importantly, sea level has massively risen over the last number of years. Since 1901, sea level has risen about 1.9 millimeters a year. We have seen temporal and spatial patterns change in patterns over the last number of years as well. The type of participation, the amount of precipitation, and the amount of warm years has absolutely increased over that time period. And often you'll hear, why has it increased? And as with any ecosystem, any biome that exists or ecological system that exists throughout the world, there is a certain limit of what can be taken. with the amount of people living on the planet now, we now have, scientists have now coined the term the Anthropocene, much like we've given scales of time through past history, such as Jurassic, Carboniferous, that we have all heard of. While it's not scientifically accepted, Anthropocene is being used due to the anthropological issues that are happening throughout the world, and the effect that humans have on the planet is undeniable. There's the other thing you'll often hear is, when you speak about climate change and you want to really get the point across, is people often say, sure, it's nice out today, we're happy with the good weather. There's a massive difference between weather and climate. And it's often said that climate is what you expect, but weather is what you guess. And the way we look at that is, weather is conditional to the atmosphere on your location and on your time frame. And we can measure weather within minutes, hours, and a couple of days. After a couple of days, it only becomes guesses and scenario works. Whereas climate is a collective state of information over a given time, often over decades. And a lot of scenarios you'll see will be over 30-year to 50-year periods. So when we're talking about either climate or weather, we're looking at the location. Climate can be identified for a globe, a region, or a city over time scales. If we're talking short time scales, we're talking weather. If we're talking long time scales, we're talking climate. And then we're talking about the averages of what we experience. So that's really important to let people know of. Yes, we have different weather. Yes, the weather can be expected, can be changed. But when we talk about climate, we're talking about long-term climate change. Some of the evidence that we've seen, and in particular since the late 80s, is the amount of extreme weather and weather events that we're seeing over that time. It's really important to understand that changes in our climate and the way we've sped up our climate change and our climate cycles are creating devastating effects within our systems. This is the EU record of extreme events over the last 40 years. We can clearly see since the 1980s up, the amount of recorded information of extreme events throughout Europe has increased drastically. We've had increased number of storms. We've increased number of heat waves and flood and wet mass movement issues as well. This is something that's recorded and something proof that we have right at our fingertips that we can use every day to speak about climate change. Some evidence from Ireland, and we've all seen this thing. This is Ross Bay Beach in County Kerry. The first picture taken aerial shot taken in 2005, and then some 14 years later taken again. And you can absolutely see in the 15-year period, due to increased weathering, increased storm action, increased wave action, the landscape within this beach has completely changed. From here, the beach is completely narrowed. Part of the land has now completely disappeared and been cut off. The internal outlets and overall shape of the land has changed drastically within 15 years. In 2013, on New Year's Eve, it experienced a massive storm with extremely high waves that actually reached up onto the beach, ripped up pathways, footpaths, and completely destroyed part of the beach. So we can go out in our local community, and we all have memories, if you're of a certain age, where places you went, the biodiversity has changed. You used to go to a local lake to feed the swans. They're now not there anymore. And things like that, small things that you can see and put your finger on. The other thing we're always interested in is to change the type of biodiversity that we have and changes within the biodiversity. We can see just from this graph, and this is only just a couple of examples, and these are species of bees and types of fish, reptiles, that 45% of bees are at harm of being regionally extinct, critically endangered, or vulnerable, and near threatened. So biodiversity is changing. We have an influx of invasive species. The living parameters of species has changed as well. They're moving from further upland, further north, or to higher altitudes in order to live within their comfort zones. And these are real examples of what you can do, or what you can see and what you can speak about when we talk about climate change and to those people we're trying to influence. So the next thing I want you to do is go back to Slido. If you have it open, the second question should automatically be there for you. And before we get into specific examples of leaders and what you can do, I would like you to tell me, what is one word you would associate with climate leadership? I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. And it can be anything, and you can enter multiple ones as well. So we have a couple of insofar, so knowledge, advocates, courage, rare. And that's something that we'll talk about in a minute. Perseverance, personal action, excellent. And these are all really good words to describe what would you associate with climate change and what does that mean? And what would you associate with climate leadership? Because remember, there's different types of climate leaders. We've those on the national scale, we've local ones, we've ones on just communities, or you can be a climate leader when you're your own home. So we've quite a few there. So courage, knowledge, change, and courageous. So we're looking for people who are going to stand out, who are really going to step up to the mark, aren't afraid of what people will say to them, and really want to elicit change within their area and within their communities, within their business. And there is different types of ways of being climate leaders. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague Seamus Hoyne here, who's going to talk through some different examples of climate leadership.
Great, thanks very much, Darren. And some really interesting words that were thrown up there. You know, I think courage being one, empowering, another one that I noted, knowledge and perseverance. So we're just going to take you through some examples of climate leaders that you'll recognize immediately, hopefully. And maybe just talk through some of their backgrounds and their traits and activities that they've moved involved in the climate change agenda. So Mary Robinson, obviously very well known within Ireland, you know, a huge presence in Irish society and in the political landscape, you know, in her time as president, and then moved from there into the international agenda and particularly into the UN. And I suppose uniquely in the climate change agenda area, Mary Robinson has taken a particular focus on the whole area of climate justice in the areas of developing countries and for the impacts that climate change is going to have globally on people in developing countries or in parts of the world that are particularly exposed to the effects of climate change. So rising sea levels, drought, food shortages. So, I mean, one of the traits of Mary Robinson's engagement in the climate change agenda has been very much highly articulate in terms of presenting the challenges that climate change presents to the global the economy and society, but focusing that message right back down on people and the impacts that climate change have on people, and trying to then mobilize investment and policies to address that issue. So, you know, anybody that has seen Mary Robinson speak on the topic or any of the events that she has spoken at, you know, hugely powerful presenter in public, but also hugely impassioned and articulate to be able to get that message across to others. As Darren said, they might be climate ambivalent or climate deniers, you know, so having the courage, as many people put up as some of their key words, and also persevering over many years with the message on climate action and climate change. So the next slide, please, Darren. So again, another leader that you may recognize, Al Gore, former vice president in the United States. So obviously very timely to be talking about presidents and vice presidents from the US at the moment. But I mean, he took a significant step into the international stage in terms of climate action after his term as vice president. The kind of, in terms of mass communication around the issue of climate change, his filmed Inconvenient Truth, certainly was one of kind of the major interventions in kind of mass media around the topic of climate change back in 2007, 2008. So again, very different from Mary Robinson that we've spoken about. He's come from a corporate background, very much from the capital world, but used his political experience and political positioning at an international stage to push the climate change agenda, plus push the need for climate action, and has stimulated a movement at an international level. And again, similar to Mary Robinson, we have that very articulate messaging, using his position to get a message across, but then mobilizing others in lots of different ways. Again, in some cases, some people would find some of the positions that Al Gore has taken controversial, others would not. But again, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize also. So I think reflected in the broader scientific community as having made a significant change, an impact on the whole issue of climate change and the conversation that we have had around that topic. And the next slide then, please, Darren, is again somebody well recognized in media but has come from a very different place. So Greta Thunberg has, evolved into an internationally recognized person. She is a teenager that took a personal position at a particular time in her life for particular reasons, and that grew into a movement, and she found herself catapulted into this position where she was being invited to speak to major significant conferences with world leaders. So it shows from a particular perspective, when you look at that journey that she's taken from making a personal commitment. Some will say that there were a lot of synergies and opportunities that allowed her to travel on the journey that she did. But certainly, again, a very articulate speaker on the topic, very passionate, and had the ability to bring significant number of people with her. Again, there are also people who will debate the position that she was put in, the attention that she has received, and some of the challenges she has faced. But certainly in terms of mobilizing a new movement of young people that had somebody that they could connect with, she certainly can be positioned as a leader. And if we look across those three people that myself and Darren have just picked out, there are lots and lots of leaders at national and international level that we could have picked to present to you. Some of the traits that they inhibit or have that are common across the three, and to reflect back on some of the key words that you put up were courage. They all have the courage of their convictions. They have either put their careers on the line by taking particular positions, put their personal lives on the line, or put their money on the line to back their commitments. They have absolute perseverance. And there are lots of examples of where they have taken that over the last number of years and over their careers. They are empowering, so they have brought people with them. And I think the value of leadership, particularly in the climate agenda, if we look back to the first question you were asked is who is responsible for tackling climate change? It's everybody. So no one of these people can address the climate change agenda. Our leaders in the climate and the action against climate change have to bring society with them. So from looking at kind of an internationally recognized leader's position, we're going to move on now and talk to what we consider is even more important, is leadership that can be done at a local, personal and individual level. So I'll pass you back to Darren.
Thanks, Seamus. It really is great to see that people are stepping up to the mark, and we can follow the lead of these international leaders, but do it on a much smaller scale and become communities of interest, which are really important within a local time frame, especially in times of COVID when we're all stuck at home. So reaching out and doing stuff online and interacting with people who have the same interests as us are really important. You'll see since climate change has become such a hot topic over the last couple of years, with people like Greta, who's done Trojan work to bring it to the forefront, using social media, using young people to get your message out. We have things in Ireland like Fridays for Future that organise marches, and some examples from throughout the world. And people, you can see the amount of people turning up to these and the amount of people interacting with Stop Climate Chaos are really important, and doing it on a local level. And the majority of them, and not all of them, are young people. They're really looking at, well, when I'm older, what's the world I want to live in? What's the world I want to bring the next generation into? And we're asking ourselves, what's the world we want to leave to our last, to the next generation? And it's really important then to be able to get involved within local initiatives and doing local things. And there's a multitude of things that you can do through your business, through your community, through families, through individual. And we just want to highlight some of those examples and hope show you things that could be done yourself or things that you can get involved in. In Tipperary itself, and something that Seamus is involved in and I've been involved in, is Sustainable Tipp. Tipperary County Council, along with Tipperary Energy Agency and LIT, Turles, have really looked at how to make an area sustainable. What can we do to reduce our carbon footprint? What can you do to reduce your energy? And it's through a number of different things, through things like schools who've met energy targets due to energy efficient upgrades, using grants that are available, home grants are available, fixing lighting within GA pitches, looking for grants around that. And those community of interests, using more sustainable development stuff and sustainable outputs is really important. Energy upgrades at the Scouts Hall. These are communities of interest who've come together and said, okay, what can we do within our area to try and help climate change, try and help be more sustainable, and look at reducing our carbon footprint as much as we can. In Limerick, one of the things that I've seen and that has been quite popular over the last couple of years is an urban co-op. Again, this opened in July 2013 as a buying club, and it was really small. It was selling fruits and vegetables, bread and eggs from local suppliers. They now offer a full service grocery store, a community wellness hub, and have over 2,000 members. I think it costs about €1 to join. You can go shopping there. You can do your full shopping. All their supplies are given by local suppliers. It's local farmers, local bakers, local bread makers, community gardens, community funds that are all working together to do this. And at present, they're actually fundraising to open a community wellness kitchen so that they can show people how to cook within there, how to use sustainable, how to grow their own vegetables, to grow their own fruits, and look at ways of cooking that within their own areas. So they're really fantastic. And it's people, it's again that community of interest that came together in order to do this. It's people having an idea, saying, I'm sick of important stuff from overseas. Let's see, we have local growers, we have local people involved. Let's do it with them and see what we can get. And see, can we make a go at this? And it really has worked really, really well. And it involves so many people, as I said. Having one local co-op involved in over 50 local suppliers is just fantastic. And it's creating an economic balance within the communities as well. Things you can do yourself and join or look at and visit, really important. Beekeeping is such an important thing. As I showed earlier, over 45% of bee species are under threat due to climate change, due to changes within their ecosystem. So whether it be that changes in temperature, invasive species, and in particular things like the change in agriculture and monoculture. So we all seen when we're driving throughout the countryside, these lovely flat green fields. But unfortunately, these flat green fields, while they look nice as we drive past, don't really add anything to our society. So looking at talking to farmers about leaving the edges of their farms open to wildflowers, hedgerows left for longer, along back gardens, doing wildflower gardens as well, community schools looking at wildflowers and things like that, and working with beekeepers and things like that is really important, and something that can be done locally and easily. And these beekeeper associations are found all over Ireland. One of the biggest things we've seen over the last couple of years, and something that a lot of people are aware of, is the Clough-Jordan Eco Village, which you can visit and see, that are lived work there all year round. They do fantastic work, and they do training. They do outreach with schools and universities and people that can go there, and they're self-sustaining and self-sufficient. And that's, again, people who are really interested and come together to make a community of stuff. And it's not only things like that, those bigger things. We can look at people from secondary schools and primary schools that are doing fantastic work and really getting that information out there about what we can do. So these are some of the 2020 National Young Environmentalist Award winners and finalists. So schools, so students at David's College in Mallow, who created YouTube videos on helping to reduce plastic pollution and addressing climate change, won the main prize. The Educate Together secondary school in Dublin done projects and research on how to protect the oceans from microplastics. In Donegal, we have the Climates, which are a group of conscientious students who worked hard and better at maintaining and protecting their local communities, and worked with older people, older groups, men's sheds, OAPs. So involving everyone for the community. Remember, climate justice and climate change, when we talk about it, is climate for all, not just for the few. So really looking at all levels of aspects. You can get involved in a small level or a big level. Either way, you can do simple things within your own home. Switch to renewable energy. In particular, look at if you can get community power, and looking at local community that are energy efficient and renewable energy. Eat less meat. Try and be vegetarian 1 or 2 days a week, which we do in our house. The carbon footprint of meat production, and red meat production in particular, is extremely high. The methane production used for the amount of agriculture and farming that is needed for red meat is really high. Have a compost bin. Do you compost? Look at your food waste. How can you reduce your food output and food waste? Use LED light bulbs in your house. Change out and make sure they're longer lasting, they're better for the environment, and they work out better in the long run. Eco-friendly cleaning projects, much safer, much nicer, and better for the environment. Buy local. Look and see, do you have community gardens? Do you have community hubs that you can interact with? Something simple, plant some trees, or switch to reusable cups for your morning coffee. Important with things like that, if you decide that I'm going to invest in the reusable cup, I'm going to invest in reusable bags, make sure you use them. Don't invest in things and think, okay, I'm done now, I don't have to do anything more, and still go out and use your disposable cups and your disposable bags. Remember that things we need to have things that are going to last for years, and do things that we'll end up saving money in the long run and saving the environment as well. So, last question of this evening on Slido again, it should open up for you. If you were to think of one thing that you would like to commit in changing in your life in regards to tackling climate change in the next 6 months, what would you do? Would it be, it could be something simple like taking more walks, using the car less. If you're in an area that has better public transport, use that more. Decide to get a compost bin. There's a number of things you can do, small and large. or even something simple as get involved with your local environmental network. Each county has a public environmental network, often accessed through social media and things like that. So this should automatically come up again on your Slido if you have it open. So if you think of anything that you would like to commit to in the next 6 months, it'd be fantastic. So we've 2 so far. So we've changed in light bulbs. Again, something excellent and something easy that can be done. Eating less meat, better, good for us, better for the environment. So, excellent. Speak more as well. Try being vegetarian at least once a week, which is fantastic. Shop locally sourced foods. I can't tell you how important that is in regards to a climate change initiative. Shopping locally, sustainability, local economy, and supporting our neighbours is so important. Wow, we have some fantastic things here. Walking more. Excellent. And one of the things for walking more, which is really good, is come up with people and try and do a challenge. Just set yourself a monthly challenge. In LIT last month, we took part in Walktober, which was fantastic. So we all got out and committed to doing at least 10,000 steps a day, going for more walks and using the car less. And it was really good with competitions with other teams as well, which was fantastic. So with COVID, we know that we're stuck at home and seeing people less. So doing your walking more, and send out maybe an online group and keeping track of what you can do is something fantastic. So if you have any questions, as Seamus said at the start, you can put them in the chat function at the side and we may hopefully be able to answer them. Or if anyone has anything else that they would like to add, that they do as well. Thank you.
And thanks very much, Darren. I suppose in conclusion, I suppose the ethos behind Darren and myself coming up with this topic was really just to get that message across that Darren was speaking about, that often people think that the responsibility for addressing climate change is the political leaders or other leaders that we see in society, and ultimately it is their responsibility, but we can't just depend on them to deal with the issue. It's up to everybody to be a leader in whatever way they can, you know, so whether it's leading from the front or often leading from behind, doing the small things in the background that can inspire people around you. You don't necessarily need to be in the limelight. You don't need or want, if you don't want to be that person, you can be a quiet leader. Often the quiet leaders from sporting activities are the ones that say the least, but the words that they do say mean a lot. So we really do appreciate people taking the time out. I know people are busy living online with online events. So another one late in the evening is probably not what everybody's looking for. I think I see a question coming in there from William. So what actions could be taken to stop the super polluter countries? So, you know, let's talk about that definition of super polluters. So in many ways, Ireland is a super polluter as a per head of population. You know, our greenhouse gas emissions are significantly higher than any of the other countries in Europe. You know, we can have that debate about the impact of agriculture on our overall emissions. I mean, I think ultimately the super polluter countries, if we look in the last 12 months, one of the huge shifts geopolitically has been China's commitment to be net zero by 2050. So that political intent and the investment that they're going to put behind it will be a game changer. We do have significant challenges, obviously, in the EU, in the US, in terms of their policy positions. I think that should change with the new administration. How stable and long living that kind of commitment will be, given the political landscape over there, is hard to judge. think one of the significant challenges is India. Again, they have a lot of ambitious plans in terms of decarbonisation, but the energy infrastructure and the structure of the economy makes that a challenge. I think, you know, globally, politically, the Paris Agreement is where it's at, and putting in the mechanisms where countries have to respond and meet their targets there is ultimately the geopolitical action that has to happen. Next question was from Alvin. How do you think we can reduce our waste with the impact of COVID, which has led to more single-use plastic being used? I think very good question. I think ultimately the first 6 months of COVID has absolutely seen more single-use plastic being used. I think the fact that COVID is likely to be with us for a significant period, I think now many people are trying to think about alternative ways. The first 6 months was immediate response, knee-jerk reaction. We had to put everything in place. I think personally, this is my personal view, I think we will see new innovations in ways to address that over the future. And I think, you know, COVID has had many more benefits. Personally, I had 30 flights last year for work. I've had 2 this year. So my carbon footprint has been reduced significantly. I know, Darren, have you any comments on either of those questions?
Just a suggestion with Alvin, especially as we're coming up to Christmas and we know that our online shopping is probably going to increase massively, which will increase the single-use plastic. I would suggest shop locally, in particular if we're doing online shopping. There's a website now that we can access that gives the local sustainable shopping that you can do within Ireland. If you are contacting or ordering online from any smaller boutiques and things like that, put in your comments to use less packaging. A lot of times you'll find smaller businesses overboard with their packaging and their wrapping and things to try and make it look prettier. It's something that I've done as well, ordering stuff online. Can we take out all that extra stuff in the packaging that we don't need, and simple packaging. And you'll find that a lot of people will actually do something, help out and do that as well. It's something small. It's not going to be a massive answer, but it's something that we can do, particularly as our shopping increases over the next month as we approach Christmas. Obviously, if you're shopping from some of the bigger online ones, these are pre-packaged and there's not much we can do. But if we're smaller boutiques, we'll definitely be able to help. At smaller businesses, we'll definitely be able to do things like that. And try and shop at eco-friendly businesses as well that use recycling packaging. If I'm ordering from anywhere online, I will contact beforehand and ask, is your packaging recycling? And if it's not, 9 out of 10 times I will not order from them. Unless it's something my 7-year-old son wants, and for peace of mind, I'll order it.
So Derek is asking a question there or comment in terms of our inefficient housing stock from a thermal perspective, and lots of people working from home, as we can all attest to. It's the time now for government to brave and increase deep retrofit grants. I think the response to that I would give, Derek, is that absolutely the ambition for deep retrofitting of our housing stock has to be very ambitious, and the government has to be brave in terms of how we manage that, whether that will be grants or other incentive mechanisms. I suppose it's been proven time and time again that grants are a reasonably blunt incentive mechanism. There are other tools out there, and that grants may not always be the right mechanism for some sectors of society. But there is work going on to look at other mechanisms, including low interest loans or pay as you save schemes. And I think ultimately we need a basket of measures that will suit particular homeowners in particular situations. We also have a very large social housing stock that needs retrofitting, so local authorities are going to be critical to the delivery of that. So I think there's a mix of measures, but the retrofitting challenge is a huge one. 500,000 homes to be retrofitted in the next 10 years. Investments of between 20 and 25 billion euros. So, and scaling up with lots and lots of jobs. In parallel with having to retrofit our public building stock. So our institutes of technology, our offices, our hospitals, plus building new homes for people. Our construction sector has a lot of work to do in the next 10 years. So I'm conscious that we did promise to try and finish in 45 minutes. For myself and Darren, we're not too bad in terms of timekeeping. We're only 7 minutes over. Unless there's any final comments, I just wanted to particularly say thanks to Darren for he did the majority of the heavy lifting in terms of preparing for this evening's presentation. Also, the Patricia from Mary Immaculate College. They have been coordinating the Tipperary Science Festival for the last number of years, and again have been very collaborative in cooperation with LIT to deliver activity in Tipperary. So we're delighted to be able to cooperate with them, and obviously Science Foundation Ireland who support Science Week and obviously all the government departments. So thanks very much everybody for taking the time out of your busy days, and we'll be making the recording available if you want to share it with any of your friends. And remember, just do that one small thing, as Darren said, shop local, don't cut the grass. It's only one small thing, and making sure everybody else can do one small thing. So, and be leaders. Okay. So thanks, stay everyone safe, everybody, and we'll stay safe.
Have a good evening.